Martin Luther King Jr., a legacy of equality and justice. Introduction. Luther King Jr. is one of the most revered figures in American history. His leadership in the civil rights movement brought about significant changes in the United States, aiming to eradicate racial inequality and promote justice. This essay explores his life, philosophy, achievements, and the enduring impact of his work on society. Early life and education. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the second child of Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. King's upbringing in a deeply religious family shaped his future path as a minister and a leader. He attended Booker T. Washington High School, where he was known for his academic prowess and oratory skills. In 1944, King entered Morehouse College at the age of 15 under a special wartime program that aimed to boost college enrollment by admitting promising high school students. He graduated in 1948 with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, influenced by the college president, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays. King's commitment to social justice and his understanding of Christian love and ethics deepened. King continued his education at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1951. It was during this period that he was introduced to the philosophy of nonviolent resistance, particularly the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, which would later become the cornerstone of his activism. The Montgomery bus boycott. King's rise to national prominence began with the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. The boycott was sparked by the arrest of Rosa Parks, an African-American woman who refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. As a result, African Americans in Montgomery, Alabama, organized a boycott of the city's buses, which lasted for 381 days. King, then a young pastor at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, was elected president of the newly formed Montgomery Improvement Association (MIA). His leadership and eloquent speeches mobilized the black community and drew national attention to the boycott. Despite facing threats, harassment, and even the bombing of his home, King remained steadfast. The boycott ended in victory when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. This triumph marked the beginning of King's career as a leader of the civil rights movement and set the stage for future campaigns against racial injustice. The philosophy of nonviolence. Central to King's approach to social change was the philosophy of nonviolence. He believed that nonviolent resistance was the most powerful weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for justice. This philosophy was rooted in Christian teachings and the strategies employed by Gandhi in India's fight for independence. King outlined 6 principles of nonviolence in his book Stride Toward Freedom 1958. Nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. It is not a method for cowards. It does resist. Nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. The end result of nonviolence is redemption and reconciliation. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. The nonviolent resistor seeks to defeat the unjust system. Nonviolence holds that suffering can educate and transform. It accepts suffering without retaliation. Nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. It resists violence of the spirit as well as the body. Nonviolence believes that the universe is on the side of justice. The nonviolent resistor has deep faith in the future. These principles guided King and his followers in various campaigns, emphasizing the importance of maintaining moral integrity and humanity even in the face of brutal opposition. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957. King co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference (SCLC) with other black ministers and activists. The SCLC aimed to harness the moral authority and organizing power of black churches to conduct nonviolent protests and achieve civil rights reform. As president of the SCLC, King traveled extensively, giving speeches, organizing protests, and meeting with political leaders to advocate for racial equality. One of the SCLC's first major campaigns was the Albany Movement in Georgia 1961 to 1962. Although the campaign faced challenges and was deemed less successful than hoped, it provided valuable lessons in the dynamics of mass protest and the need for more strategic planning. Birmingham Campaign of 1963 was a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. Birmingham, Alabama, was known for its strict enforcement of segregation and its violent response to civil rights activism. The SCLC, in conjunction with local activists, launched a series of nonviolent protests, including sit-ins, marches, and boycotts, to challenge the city's segregation laws. The campaign faced fierce resistance from the authorities, led by Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, who used fire hoses, police dogs, and mass arrests to suppress the demonstrators. The brutality of the response, broadcast on national television, shocked the conscience of the nation and garnered widespread sympathy for the civil rights cause. King's arrest during the campaign led to his writing of the letter from Birmingham jail, a powerful and eloquent defense of civil disobedience and the moral imperative to fight injustice. In the letter, King addressed criticism from white clergy who called for patience and gradualism, arguing that African Americans could no longer wait for their rights to be recognized. The March on Washington, August 28, 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom brought together over 250,000 people from across the United States. The event, organized by a coalition of civil rights, labor, and religious organizations, aimed to demand comprehensive civil rights legislation, equal employment opportunities, and an end to racial segregation. It was at this historic gathering that King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In his speech, King articulated his vision of a racially integrated and harmonious America, where people would be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. The speech remains one of the most powerful and enduring expressions of the American civil rights struggle. Civil Rights Act of 1960. For the momentum generated by the Birmingham campaign and the March on Washington contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The act was one of the most significant pieces of civil rights legislation in American history. It outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin and ended segregation in public places and employment. King's tireless advocacy and strategic leadership played a crucial role in the enactment of this landmark legislation. The Civil Rights Act marked a major victory in the fight for racial equality and demonstrated the power of nonviolent protest and moral persuasion. Selma and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Despite the achievements of the Civil Rights Act, African Americans in the South continued to face significant barriers to voting. To address this issue, King and the SCLC turned their attention to Selma, Alabama, where local activists had been working to register black voters in the face of violent opposition. The Selma to Montgomery marches in March 1965 aimed to highlight the disenfranchisement of black voters and demand federal action. The first march, known as Bloody Sunday, saw peaceful protesters brutally attacked by state troopers as they attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The violence, captured on television, provoked national outrage and increased support for the voting rights campaign. King led a second, symbolic march to the bridge, followed by a successful third march from Selma to Montgomery, which culminated in a rally at the state capitol. The Selma marches were instrumental in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibited racial discrimination in voting and provided for federal oversight of voter registration in areas with a history of discriminatory practices. The Poor People's Campaign. In the final years of his life, King expanded his focus to address economic inequality and poverty. He believed that racial justice could not be achieved without economic justice and that the fight for civil rights must include efforts to improve the living conditions of all disadvantaged Americans, regardless of race. In 1967, King announced the Poor People's Campaign, a multiracial effort to demand economic and human rights for poor Americans. The campaign aimed to address issues such as unemployment, housing, and income inequality, and it planned a massive march on Washington to present these demands to the federal government. King's assassination on April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, cut short his efforts to lead the Poor People's Campaign. However, the movement continued under the leadership of the SCLC and other civil rights organizations, culminating in the Poor People's March on Washington in June 1968. Legacy and impact. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is profound and far-reaching. His leadership in the civil rights movement transformed American society and paved the way for subsequent generations to continue the fight for equality and justice. His commitment to nonviolence and his ability to articulate a vision of a better future inspired millions and left an indelible mark on the world. King's work led to significant legislative and social changes, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which helped dismantle institutionalized racism and improve the lives of African Americans. His speeches and writings continue to be studied and revered for their moral clarity and rhetorical power. The annual celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States serves as a reminder of his contributions and the ongoing struggle for civil rights. His life and legacy encourage individuals to continue working towards a more just and equitable society. Conclusion. Martin Luther King Jr. was a visionary leader whose dedication to nonviolence and justice changed the course of American history. His unwavering commitment to equality, his strategic